The past hides many secrets, and we're here to uncover them. Join us on this epic historical journey. Music playing. Legend has it there's a 5,000-year-old magical book supposedly given to humans by an ancient Egyptian god. This book, called the Book of Thoth, is said to contain spells that can predict the future. It's shrouded in mystery. Some believe it includes ancient rituals used by secret societies. According to these stories, anyone initiated into the order must undergo a symbolic death and rebirth. Others say the book gives readers the ability to see the future using tarot cards. The original Book of Thoth was supposedly inscribed on a golden tablet and acted as a kind of spiritual guidebook. Later followers claimed it revealed a world of free love and psychedelic experiences, ideas that became central to 1960s rock and roll culture. Some of the world's most famous bands, like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, were deeply fascinated by this stuff. But what's the real story behind the Book of Thoth? What does it actually say? Does it even exist? Scientists and archaeologists in Egypt are still searching for answers. This is the story of the quest to discover the truth about what some claim is the most important book ever written. Music. In the middle of bustling London, there are shops and bookstores dedicated to magic and the occult. They sell everything from ancient wisdom books to modern-day spell books. One of the most common images you'll find is that of an ancient Egyptian god called Thoth, a strange figure with the body of a human and the head of an animal. Many shelves hold copies of his so-called Book of Thoth. Even after 5,000 years, this ancient text still fascinates modern audiences. I'm often asked to speak at conferences where Thoth's image is displayed on stage and printed on name tags. But who was Thoth, really, and why does a text dating back to the age of the pyramids still capture so much attention today? The answer lies in a story that begins over 2,000 kilometers away in North Africa's Nile Valley. For years, archaeologists working at sites across Egypt have uncovered what many consider the greatest civilization of the ancient world: music.
Archaeologist Martin Raven was excavating a 4,000-year-old burial ground when he discovered a massive tomb filled with beautiful wall paintings and intricate carvings. Findings like these revealed that ancient Egypt had a highly developed culture, a complex belief system, and a pantheon of gods. One of the most important of these was Thoth, often depicted with the body of a man and either the head of an ibis or a baboon. The ancient Egyptians believed their gods were invisible, but when they wanted to be seen, they took physical forms. Many gods had sacred animals connected to them. The baboon, for instance, seemed incredibly wise, almost human, so people believed it must have deep thoughts and associated it with Thoth. The ibis, quiet and graceful, moving slowly through the swamps, also gave the impression of deep wisdom. To the Egyptians, Thoth was a powerful god. He acted as the divine scribe, recording the decisions of the gods. He became known as the god of wisdom, and sometimes healing, and was also considered the god of magic. According to legend, Thoth passed this magical knowledge down to humans in a book said to give its readers incredible powers. Ancient Egyptian texts describe the Book of Thoth as holding esoteric or mystical wisdom, a secret knowledge that allowed people to speak to gods, talk to animals, and even enter the afterlife. There's even a famous tale about a powerful magician who managed to find the hidden book. Once he had it, he could suddenly understand the language of animals, watch the stars move across the sky, and grasp the entire mechanism of the universe. That's the kind of reputation the Book of Thoth had. Its legend spread far and wide throughout the ancient world.
In the 3rd century BCE, Alexander the Great, the warrior king, invaded Egypt. The Greek conquerors were blown away by what they found, a civilization with awe-inspiring buildings and massive pyramids that was, at that point, at its peak. Applause music. The Greeks were so impressed that they adopted many parts of Egyptian religion, including some of the gods. One such god was Thoth. The Greeks already had a deity named Hermes, who they believed was the patron of science and the inventor of writing. When they came across Thoth, whom the Egyptians also believed invented writing, math and geometry, skills that helped them build the pyramids, they decided the two were the same god. So the Greeks declared that Hermes and Thoth were one and the same. Music, they claim to have adopted Thoth's book as well, creating a new version called the Corpus Hermeticum. But when they did that, Greek influence only continued to grow. The original Egyptian text and the newer Greek version became confused over time. As Greek culture absorbed the original Egyptian text, it simply vanished. According to legend, one final copy of the original Book of Thoth was buried alongside the curious Egyptian magician who read it and uncovered the secrets of the stars. But whatever the truth is, the original Egyptian book was lost and replaced by the new Greek version. Music. The original text wasn't rediscovered for thousands of years. The Romans followed in the Greeks' footsteps, and early Roman culture adopted the wisdom of the Corpus Hermeticum. But then a major shift happened. Music Christianity spread across Europe. References to pagan gods like Thoth and Hermes were banned. The Greek version of the Book of Thoth was suppressed, especially once the Roman Empire officially adopted Christianity. This ancient pagan philosophy was wiped out. Music. Those who defended pagan ideas were burned at the stake or tortured on the wheel. The general wave of intolerance and religious conquest led to the loss of the Corpus Hermeticum. Now the original Egyptian Book of Thoth was gone, and even the Greek version had disappeared from the record. It seemed like everything written in the Book of Thoth was lost forever. But then another revolution in Western thought began. In the 14th century, the Renaissance began in Italy. It was a time of intellectual ferment, full of new ideas and a rediscovery of old ones. People were going back to the wisdom of classical Greece and Egypt. The word Renaissance literally means rebirth. The first recorded use of the term was in the 15th century when someone said, "It feels like I'm witnessing a rebirth of ancient culture through this new learning." From award-winning documentaries and history podcasts to expert historians like Dan Snow, Susanna Lipscomb, Lucy Worsley, Mary Beard, Tristan Hughes, and me, Matt Lewis, you can subscribe using the link in the description for an exclusive discount and start your own historical journey. From the wonders of ancient Egypt and the life of Boudica to Napoleon's rise and Shackleton's endurance, history, anytime, anywhere, there was a renewed interest in pre-Christian ideas. For example, if you look at Botticelli's paintings of Venus and Mars, or the birth of Venus, you'll see pagan gods being painted in Europe for the first time in 1,000 years. This revived fascination with ancient wisdom led to the rediscovery of the Greek version of the Corpus Hermeticum. For Christian Europe at the time, this was a bombshell. The Catholic Church had dominated Europe for over 1,000 years, but many felt it had become corrupt and overreaching. The papacy was widely discredited. Indulgences, forgiveness, were being bought and sold. The Church had sunk to a new low in the eyes of ordinary people. A wave of opposition grew. People began looking to ancient Egypt and classical Greece for new spiritual and philosophical inspiration. Then someone brought the Corpus Hermeticum to Florence, and the Medici court was blown away. Alongside the rediscovery of Plato and the pre-Socratic philosophers, they now had access to the Hermetic texts, believed to be the writings of Thoth. For the first time, the Greek version of the Book of Thoth was translated into Latin and published in Italy. It quickly became one of the most influential books of the time, reprinted multiple times over the next 150 years. It may not have been the original Egyptian version, but it spread rapidly across Renaissance Europe, riding a wave of optimism. What made the Greek version of the Book of Thoth so powerful was its radical message about the role of humans in the universe. For those questioning the authority of the Church, it felt like a revelation. It offered a totally different view of humanity, not as fallen beings cast out of Eden, but as noble and powerful participants in creation itself. The Book of Thoth seemed to say that humans weren't just servants of the gods. They didn't just share in divine powers. They were meant to use them to build a better, more beautiful world. Its message suggested a new understanding of humanity's role on Earth. According to these texts, humans existed somewhere between angels and animals, and held a special role. They were co-creators with God, destined to create beautiful things, just as God had. It was a vision filled with optimism about the human mind, imagination, and our ability to understand the universe. To many, the Book of Thoth didn't just feel like ancient myth. It felt like a spark, something that could light the way to a better world. What made this message about humanity so powerful was its age. It seemed to come from a much purer time before the church had corrupted everything. If you were a Renaissance thinker, you might have started believing that if we could somehow restore this ancient wisdom to its rightful place, we could return to a more ideal world. The idea was, what's ancient must be good, and this ancient wisdom seemed to trace all the way back to Egypt. The knowledge of Thoth was thought to be as old as knowledge itself. Think of it like a waterfall. Picture a mountain or an L-shaped cliff with crystal-clear water pouring down. Over time, as the water flows through the ages, it becomes muddy. Renaissance philosophers, when they got their hands on the Corpus Hermeticum, believed they were going back to that pure source, the clear water of ancient wisdom. But here's the irony. This whole alternative philosophy was based on the Greek version of the Book of Thoth. Nobody could really be sure how closely it was connected to the original Egyptian text. Still, in the name of Egyptian wisdom, things started heading in some strange directions, especially in the early 18th century. That's when the first Grand Masonic Lodge was established in London. It would go on to become the most powerful and successful secret society ever, full of politicians, presidents, business leaders, and citizens. But in the early 1700s, it was just a small group of men looking for a better world. It was a time of war and intolerance. England and Scotland were fighting, Protestants and Catholics were clashing. Society was plagued by corruption in both politics and religion. The early Freemasons were trying to find a way to bring people together and move past those divisions. They were searching for inspiration, and they found it in the Renaissance and the rediscovery of the ancient world. We might not be able to trace a direct historical link, but the rituals and core purpose of Freemasonry clearly connect to ancient Egypt. Just like the Renaissance thinkers before them, early Freemasons were fascinated by Thoth's view of humanity. To them, classical Egypt was the beginning of real civilization. Science and mathematics, especially math, the foundation of architecture, were sacred. Freemasons saw math as the foundation of the arts they were rooted in. That's why they deeply respected everything from the classical world, especially ancient Egypt. To show this admiration, Freemasons adopted Egyptian imagery. Suddenly, pyramids and sphinxes were everywhere. Anything related to Egypt became symbolic. We're sitting now in Freemasons Hall in London, number 10 Great Queen Street, and it's a perfect example of restrained Egyptian architecture. They had copies of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Their temple walls were decorated with lotus-styled columns and hieroglyphs. Most importantly, Freemasons focused on a particular part of the Hermetic texts, the rituals. Every Mason had to go through them. These rituals traced back to ancient Egypt and involved a symbolic rebirth. Anyone joining the order had to die symbolically and be reborn as a new person. This idea of rebirth is central to the Hermetic texts. Thoth appears once again, just like in ancient Egypt, as the divine figure who grants knowledge to initiates and ensures their personal immortality. A new age claimed it had rediscovered the ways of ancient Egypt, even though the text they relied on was Greek. Still, no one could say for sure what was in Thoth's original book, and that uncertainty led to even more versions popping up. In late 18th century Paris, as Freemasonry spread across Europe, something new started brewing in France. Antoine Coeur de Gebelin was a French-Swiss writer and thinker. He was a mystic and a Freemason, actually part of the same Paris lodge as Voltaire. He was close to the French king and very well connected. Coeur de Gebelin had two big interests, ancient Egypt and playing cards. Cards were a popular hobby at the time, and many decks featured mythical or folkloric figures. They were used in games like tarot, a kind of 18th century version of rummy or bridge.
One day, while flipping through a deck of tarot cards, I had a sudden realization. I started studying the deck and came to a stunning conclusion. These cards were based on a hidden philosophy.
He dug deeper and became convinced that the cards weren't just for games, they were actually about the most important book in the world, the Book of Knowledge, a book about the book. He believed it was secretly preserved in the form of a card game. Now, Coeur de Gebelin's theory that the tarot was the original Book of Thoth might sound far-fetched, but it wasn't as crazy as it seems. Scholars knew the Egyptians would have written the Book of Thoth in hieroglyphs. And since hieroglyphs are basically pictures just like tarot cards, it made sense to Coeur de Gebelin that the original Egyptian wisdom of Thoth could have once been represented in picture form on cards. All it took was someone with his insight to realize that. So now, Imagine, here's this deck of cards with symbolic images. What if that's actually the hieroglyphic book? What if this was really the Book of Thoth? In 1781, Court de Gebelin published his findings in a new book. He made a bold claim: the Book of Thoth, lost for 5,000 years, wasn't lost at all. It had survived as a deck of cards. He even argued that the word tarot came from ancient Egypt. He said the Egyptian words tar and ro meant royal road, so the tarot was the royal road to knowledge. In his mind, this proved the cards were really the Book of Thoth. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal. After all, no one could read Egyptian hieroglyphs yet. But Court de Gebelin thought he'd uncovered a deep truth. The original Egyptian book was still here, and people were finally noticing. One of the people who got swept up in the idea was a traveling salesman, teacher and spiritualist named Jean-Baptiste Alliette. He'd been dabbling in magic for years, and now he took Court de Gebelin's idea and made it his own. He created a completely different deck of tarot cards and called them the Etailla Tarot. Etailla is just his last name, spelled backwards. He added the double A for mystical reasons. His cards, he claimed, had a genuine Egyptian feel. For example, in one card marked with a C, which represents the current, the person asking the question in a tarot reading, the figure actually looks like an Egyptian man, but Alliette didn't stop there. Let's look at the Fool card. In the French version, the Fool is being attacked by a dog because he's strange and different, but Alliette thought that wasn't Egyptian enough. He believed panthers came from Egypt, so he changed it. Now the Fool was being bitten by a panther instead of a dog. According to Alliette, these cards represented the true wisdom of ancient thought. Even more than that, he said they had magical power. They could predict the future. In 1788, he even founded a society dedicated solely to interpreting his version of the Book of Thoth. They only used his tarot cards. So here we are, nearly 2,000 years after it supposedly disappeared. People were now claiming that the original Egyptian version of the Book of Thoth had resurfaced, thanks to the work of two Frenchmen. But the legend of the Book of Thoth didn't stop there. Another version would appear soon enough. In 1904, a strange and eccentric Englishman travelled to Egypt. His name was Aleister Crowley. He was a high-ranking member of a secret society called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Crowley thought of himself as a painter, poet, and master magician. He believed he was destined for greatness and even saw clues in his own name.
Some say Crowley, others Crawley. I insist it is pronounced Crowley to rhyme with holy.
During his time in Cairo, Crowley claimed that the ancient Egyptian gods had a message for him. Over the course of 3 days, he said he received a series of divine revelations. He sat in his study, writing tools ready, when a being, transparent and otherworldly, appeared behind his left shoulder and dictated to him what to write. Crowley had no doubt who this being was. He believed it was a message directly from Thoth. He titled the text he received the Book of the Law. And if he was telling the truth, this was possibly the most authentic version of the Book of Thoth yet.
Was it divine? I describe it as a gospel for a new age.
His version of the Book of Thoth wasn't a traditional story. It was a set of principles. One of them, from the third line, says, "Every man and every woman is a star." In other words, each person shines individually. We don't need a central authority to guide us. We can each find our own way. To support that vision, Crowley argued that the most important rule in his book was,
"Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law."
That became the core of a new spiritual system Crowley created called Thelema. It was a religion where almost anything went. The word Thelema means will, but not just willpower. It also includes desire, especially sexual desire.
In my version of the Book of Thoth, sex magic is central. Sex becomes a sacred act.
They practiced free love, took hallucinogenic drugs, and had visionary experiences. They believed they were tapping into hidden truths through ritual and ecstasy. They had lots of kids. Crowley wasn't trying to trick anyone. He genuinely believed he was important. Near the end of his life, he brought all his ideas together, but instead of writing a book, he created something else, another deck of tarot cards. Crowley felt the tarot captured everything he was trying to express, his entire philosophy. He published it as another version of the Book of Thoth. What was once written on papyrus had now transformed into something else, something that, among other things, justified some very strange sexual practices. Crowley died in 1947, but his legacy lived on through a new generation. In 1960s Britain, Crowley's version of the Book of Thoth was embraced by the rock and roll counterculture. His face even appeared on the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album.
A decade later, I was captivated by these ideas. I was the bassist for the 1970s new wave band Blondie.
Some of the most famous people in the world, like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, were deeply into this kind of thing. They got into meditation, started reading tarot, paying attention to their auras, and exploring all kinds of mystical stuff. Lachman believes a big part of the rock and roll counterculture can be traced back to the Book of Thoth. People were talking about the age of Aquarius, an idea rooted in ancient Egyptian tradition. That idea became central to 1960s pop culture, but in a surprising twist, New Age seekers were happy to mix and match ideas from all the different versions of the Book of Thoth. From Crowley's version, they took the drugs and the free love. From the Greek version, the Corpus Hermeticum, they borrowed the vision of a purer, more spiritual age.
The lasting appeal of the god Thoth and the philosophies linked to him lies in this idea, that we all have a deep, intuitive sense that life is more complex, more mysterious, and more meaningful than what science or religion alone tells us.
There are some really inspiring passages in the Corpus Hermeticum. One of them says,
Grow to immeasurable size. Be free from all bodily bounds. Transcend time. Believe that nothing is impossible for you. See yourself as immortal, capable of understanding everything.
What strikes Lachman most about this passage, and many others in the collection, is that they point to the limitless potential of our consciousness. They show us what our minds and spirits might be capable of. Now, what was once known as the Egyptian Book of Wisdom is completely tangled. There are 4 different versions of the Book of Thoth and its magic. The ancient Greek version, the Corpus Hermeticum, translated into Latin and adopted by Renaissance thinkers. The 18th century tarot version, a deck claiming to represent authentic Egyptian hieroglyphs. Crowley's occult version, a sexual, mystical tarot deck that he said was dictated to him by the god Thoth. The 1960s New Age version, a blend of all the above, shaped into something entirely new. 4 completely different interpretations, all claiming to be the true Egyptian Book of Thoth. But how can one book have so many wildly different meanings? Is any of them actually the original? Now, thanks to modern discoveries, we might finally be able to figure out the truth. Over the past 100 years, archaeological digs have revealed the secrets of ancient Egypt. Among them were thousands of texts written on pieces of papyrus.
If the real Book of Thoth existed, this is where we'd find it. But papyrus doesn't give up its secrets easily. These texts were written in 2 Egyptian scripts, hieroglyphic and demotic, a later, more cursive script. For centuries, no one could read either of them. They were finally deciphered in the mid-1800s, thanks to one of the strangest discoveries ever made, the Rosetta Stone. This artifact had the same text written in 3 different scripts, hieroglyphic, demotic, and ancient Greek. Before the Rosetta Stone was found, people had no idea how to understand Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Subscribe to join us on a journey to uncover more forgotten history. Like, comment, and support our mission to reveal the truth behind ancient mysteries. See you on the next adventure.